Okay, guys, so for 3.3, we are adding, subtracting, and multiplying polynomials. Poly means what? Many. So polynomials means that there are many terms in that expression, okay? So we're first going to look at adding and subtracting, and I'm going to show you two different ways to do each one, okay? And you can choose whichever way you are more comfortable with. So the first thing we're going to talk about is adding polynomials. So the first way that you can do that is to line them all up and add vertically, so straight up and down. So the thing you want to make sure that you do if you decide to add vertically is to make sure that your exponents match. So notice how I lined up the 3x to the third and the x to the third, and I lined up the x squared and the x squared. The top has an x, but the bottom doesn't, so I left a blank. And then I lined up the numbers. So, for the first example, we're just going to add these straight down. So, if there is nothing in front of the exponent, what's actually there? A 1. So, if I have 3x to the third plus 1x to the third, what does that leave me with? 4x to the third. I'm not trying to trick you. Okay, I then have a negative 2x squared minus 5x squared, so that's going to be a negative 7x squared plus 4x, and there's nothing being added to that, so that's just going to be a plus 4x, and negative 6 plus 3 is minus 3, and that's your answer. Okay, that's one way to add. You can also add polynomials horizontally and then just combine like terms like we learned about all the way back in Algebra 1. So the second example for adding is 2x to the third, or I'm sorry, thank you, 2y to the third plus 7y squared minus 6y plus negative 4y squared plus 3y minus 9. Okay, guys, so before you start adding, if you're ever adding or subtracting horizontally, the first thing that you're going to do is you're going to distribute that sign into the parentheses. Now, does an addition sign change the sign of anything inside the parentheses? No, so everything stays the same. So let's rewrite this just without parentheses. So that's going to be 2y to the third plus 7y squared minus 6y minus 4y squared plus 3y minus 9. Okay? And so then the next step is just to combine like terms. So our first term is 2y to the third. I don't see any other y to the thirds, so we're just going to rewrite 2y to the third. Then I have a plus 7y squared and a minus 4y squared, so that's going to be plus 3y squared. I have a negative 6y plus 3y, so that's going to be minus 3y. And then I have this minus 9 all by itself, so that's going to be minus 9. So really all that we're doing here is combining like terms. Okay, guys, so if we are subtracting, you can do the same thing. You can stack them and subtract vertically, or you can line them all up and subtract horizontally. So let's look at subtracting vertically first. I have 7x to the third minus 6x squared plus 3x, or minus 3x plus 7, okay? And then I'm subtracting the polynomial 6x to the third plus 3x squared minus 7x plus 5. First of all, what does subtracting do to the signs behind it?
changes it.
It changes them. So let's rewrite this, but now with everything changed to its opposite because of that subtraction. So that's going to give me 7x to the third minus 6x squared minus 3x plus 7. Now when I subtract 6x to the third, that's going to be negative 6x to the third. If I subtract 3x squared, that's minus 3x squared. If I'm subtracting a negative 7x, that changes it to plus 7x. And then minus 5, because that 5 was positive. And then let's draw the line underneath. Okay, so now let's subtract or add straight down. So 7x to the third minus 6x to the third gives me 1x to the third. Negative 6x squared minus 3x squared gives me negative 9x squared. Negative 3x plus 7x is plus 4x. And then 7x minus 5 is plus 2. And that's your answer. So let's look at what happens when we subtract horizontally. So the second example is 8x squared minus 5x plus 11. And then I'm subtracting the quantity 12x squared minus 9x minus 3. So similarly to how we did adding polynomials horizontally, we have to distribute that negative. Now in this case, distributing a negative does change the signs. So let's rewrite the whole thing, but without the parentheses. So that's going to give me 8x squared minus 5x plus 11 minus 12x squared. Negative times a negative gives me plus 9x plus 3. So that negative changed the sign of every single term behind it. Okay? And then we just combine like terms. 8x squared minus 12x squared, what does that give me? Good, negative 4x squared. Negative 5x plus 9x gives me plus 4x. And 11 plus 3 is plus 14. Now, your instructions were not to factor. They were just to add or subtract, so you are done. So all it wants you to do is combine like terms here. Okay, so now we also have to multiply, and then we will start our examples. So when we are multiplying polynomials, for our first example, we have x minus 3 and times x minus 5. Now, in Algebra 1, you learned either one of two methods. How many of you learned the FOIL method? How many of you learned the box method? Okay, so it was either you might have learned both, and then you had to pick your favorite one. I'll go back and forth between the two. Let's start with FOIL. So FOIL stands for first. The O is outside. I is inside. And L stands for last. So it's telling you how these things are being multiplied. Okay, so let's actually do this. First means I multiply the first two terms. So in this case, x times x. X times x gives me x squared. Outside means the two outside terms. So the two that are on the most outside. So that would be x times negative 5, which gives me negative 5x. Let me move that down so I have a little extra room. Inside means I'm multiplying the two inside terms. Negative 3 times x, so that's negative 3x. And then last means I'm multiplying the two last terms. So negative 3 times negative 5, which gives me positive 15. Now your last step is always to combine like terms. So that would be negative 5x minus 3x. So that's going to give me x squared minus 8x plus 15. So example 1, we have x minus 3 times x squared plus 2x minus 5. You can use FOIL on this. If you wanted to FOIL without drawing the box, you would just multiply the first term by every single term on the other side. And then you would multiply the negative 3 by every single term in the other parentheses. So you'd multiply x by everything, and then you would multiply negative 3 by everything. And then you combine like terms. You could also use the box on this. Since I did FOIL on the last one, I'm actually going to use the box. So remember to do your box. For this one, we would need a 2 by 3. So let's do 1, 2, 3. Down the side, I'm going to put my x minus 3. And across the top, I have my x squared plus 2x minus 5. So you can use FOIL if you're more comfortable with that. Because I did FOIL on the last problem, I'm using the box on this one just so you can see both ways. Okay, and then remember to finish this, you multiply every single box times each one. So let's start with the first box. X times x squared gives me x to the third. X times 2x gives me 2x squared. And x times negative 5 gives me negative 5x. And then we do the same thing with the negative 3. So basically it's exactly the same. It just gives you a different way of organizing it. So that's going to be negative 3x squared. Negative 3 times 2x is negative 6x. And then negative 3 times negative 15 is positive, or times negative 5 is positive 15. And then you combine like terms with your diagonals. So my x to the third does not have a like term. I have negative 3x squared and a 2x squared. That's going to give me negative 1x squared. And then negative 6x and negative 5x is negative 11x plus 15. And that's your answer. All right, so example 2 is also multiplication, but this time I'm multiplying 3 binomials. So I'm multiplying x minus 3 times x plus 7 times x plus 1. So what you're going to end up doing in this problem is you're actually going to end up using FOIL or box twice, going from left to right. Okay, so let's start with the first 2 binomials, x minus 3 times x plus 7. So the first means I'm multiplying the 2 first terms. So x times x gives me x squared. Make sure you put it in parentheses. O is outside, so x times 7 is plus 7x. I is inside. Negative 3 times x is negative 3x. And last, negative 3 times 7 is negative 21. And then times x plus 1, bring that down. So let's combine like terms in the big one first to make it a little bit easier for us. So that's going to give me x squared. 7x minus 3x is plus 4x minus 21 times x plus 1. And now you're basically, you can either use the box if you want or FOIL without the box. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to multiply x times every single term in the big parentheses, so I'm just going backwards this time. So x times x squared gives me x to the third. X times 4x is plus 4x squared. And x times negative 21 is minus 21x. Okay, so I just went backwards because it's a little bit easier to multiply that binomial by everything else because there's less of them. And if you guys notice, when I multiply the 1 by everything, that's going to make it really easy for me. 1 times x squared is plus x squared. 1 times 4x is plus 4x. And 1 times negative 21 minus 21. So our last step here is to combine like terms. X to the third, there's nothing to combine that with. 4x squared plus 1x squared is plus 5x squared. Negative 21x plus 4x is minus 17x. And then I have that negative 21 by itself. And that's your answer. Okay, for example 3, we are multiplying two trinomials together. So we have negative d squared plus 4d plus 3, and 3d times 3d squared minus 7d plus 6. A lot of people prefer to use the boxes on this because it sets it all up for you. You don't have to. I'm going to use the boxes because I didn't use the boxes in the previous problem. But if you do not want to use the boxes, you would just have to take each individual term and multiply them by the other terms in the adjoining parentheses. So you would do negative d squared times 3d squared. Same thing times negative 7d. And then negative d squared plus 6 times positive 6. Would it be better for me to do it that way so you guys can see it without the boxes? Okay. So we're going to do it all with different colors so that you can see everything separated. So negative d squared times 3d squared. That's going to give me negative 3d to what power? To the 4th. Then we take that negative d squared and we multiply it by the negative 7d. So that's going to be plus 7d to the 3rd. And then you have negative d squared times positive 6. So that's negative 6d squared. Everybody good so far? Okay. Let's pick a different color. Now we're going to multiply the 4d. So you're basically going to do the exact same thing. You're going to multiply 4d by every single term in the other parentheses. So 4d times 3d squared gives me plus 12d to the 3rd. 4d times negative 7d is minus 28d squared. And then 4d times 6, which gives me plus 24d. Okay, you guys okay? You have to do it one more time, but this time you're going to multiply 3 by everything in the other parentheses. I'm going to go under because I ran out of room. So 3 times 3d squared is plus 9d squared. 3 times negative 7d is negative 21d. And 3 times 6 is plus 18. If you did the boxes, you would line up the first parentheses across the top, the second one across the side, and multiply, and you would get all of these terms filled in the boxes. Okay? So then your last step would be to combine like terms. So we have a negative 3d to the 4th. Are there any other d to the 4ths? No. So this is negative 3d to the 4th power. Okay. 7d to the 3rd. And I have a 12d to the 3rd. So that's going to be plus 19d to the 3rd. I have a negative 6d squared, a negative 28d squared, and a positive 9d squared. So that's going to give me negative 6d squared minus 28d squared is negative 34d squared plus 9, so that's going to be negative 25d squared. Almost there. Then we have 24d minus 21d, so that's going to be plus 3d. And then our plus 18 all the way at the end. Okay, example 4, last one. You have 3x minus 2, all of that squared. Okay, so 3x minus 2, all of that squared. This is what I see most students do. They distribute the square. Oops. And they get 3x squared, which is 9x squared minus 2 squared, which is 4. This is incorrect. Please do not do it this way. Okay? Let's actually take a look at what this is asking us. Whenever I square something, what does that mean? It's multiplied by itself. So this is actually 3x minus 2 times 3x minus 2. Do you agree? So what you have to do whenever you see a problem like this is you want to expand it all the way. So the most important thing for these problems, when you see a quantity squared, you must expand it so that you can actually see the whole problem. Because now this is either going to be FOIL or box method. Okay? I'm going to do box because I didn't do it on the last problem. So you set up your box. If you want to use FOIL, you can. You don't have to use the box. We have 3x minus 2 and 3x minus 2. Guys, what's 3x times 3x? 9x squared. 3x times negative 2 is negative 6x. Negative 2 times 3x is negative 6x. And negative 2 times negative 2 gives me 4. And then your last step is to combine like terms. So that's going to be 9x squared. Negative 6x minus 6x is negative 12x. And then plus the 4. Okay, so see how this is different? If you were to distribute the square, you would get that first term and that last term, but you would totally miss the middle term. So please make sure that you are expanding it all of the way, and then use either FOIL or box method, depending on whichever you prefer, so that you do get that middle term. Okay? And that is adding, subtracting, and multiplying polynomials.